Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to Wix Wiz. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to create a chatbot that is driven by AI using OpenAI's ChatGPT 3. And we're going to be creating something like you see here, which is a fake Wix support chat. And you can see that if, for example, I write in here my name and I send that off to the bot, then I will get a response that is driven by AI. And you can have a complete conversation that feels like a Wix support conversation driven by AI. So if you want to build something like this, follow along. So the first thing we're going to do is head to the OpenAI website, and this is the technology that we're going to be using for our AI chat. Um, there might be other options for creating an AI chat, but this is the company that has created the very famous ChatGPT, and they offer another service called GPT-3, which is what we're going to be using to create our chatbot. And in order to do that, just head over to API. And this is where we're going to get started. So I'm just going to go over here and click Get Started. And if you don't have an account, you're going to have to create your account. You're going to have to verify your email. You are going to have to verify a phone number. And then you will get set up with some free credits that you can use to test out the API. I already created my account, so I'm just going to select all the traffic lights here and continue. It believes I'm a person. Excellent. I'm going to put in my password. Oh, sorry, I wasn't create account. I just want to log in. And there we go. So I'm in, and this is the home screen that you should get to once you create your account. And if I head over here to personal, I can go and view my API keys. Okay, so the API key is kind of like a password, which will let you access the API. And to create a key, you just have to click here, create new secret key. I'm going to do that in a moment when I pause the video so you don't see what my secret API key is. But in general, you should know that once you create this key, you should store it somewhere because you will not be able to view it again on the website. Even if you come back to this page, they will not show you your API key again. So you have to save it somewhere secure. And this is really just so that people don't get unauthorized access to your API, because eventually it does start costing money and you don't want people to make API calls on your buck. This is where you would set up billing once you pass the kind of the tokens you have, and you can check that out over here. So usage, you can see here that I have $18 of free credits, and it expires May 1st. So after May 1st, I'm going to need to set up payments if I want to keep this app running. And that's pretty much all for API keys. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to generate my API key, and then we're going to be storing it inside of our secret manager in Wix. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and be back with you in 1 second. Okay, so now that I got my API key from OpenAI, I head over to my EditorX or Wix dashboard and go to Developer Tools Secret Manager, and I added a secret where the name is OpenAI API key and the value is the API key that I got from OpenAI. And after saving that, that will be stored here in the Secrets Manager, and we can call this from the back end of our website. And if I head back over to OpenAI, you can see here that my secret key is not fully visible, and it will never be again. So if I hadn't stored my API key, it would have been lost. I could create a new one, so it's not really a big deal, but just note that once you create it, that's the last time you'll be able to see it on the OpenAI website. Now that we have an API key, we can head over to the documentation. And this is the documentation for all of the OpenAI APIs and services. And we're not going to be using all of them. We're going to be using a very specific one, which is called text completion. And text completion, to put it simply, takes a prompt and returns an answer based on what was in the prompt. So you can see here that, for example, the prompt is write a tagline for an ice cream shop, and it answers, "We serve up smiles with every scoop." And we can adjust things like how long the answer will be, what the tone of the answer will be, and stuff like that, all using the API. I do recommend taking the time to read this because it will outline, how to best use this API, and it even gives some examples of how to create something more like a chatbot, which is what we're going to be doing in this demonstration. Now, in order to actually see how to implement the API, you have to go down here to API reference. And I recommend reading some of the documentation here, introduction, authentication. And lastly, you can head over to the completions. And this is the actual instructions for how to implement this API. So first, I'm going to do some setup on our Wix website. So I'm going to head over back to my editor, and I'm going to create a backend file. I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you can see a little better. So I'm going to go here to either plus or add web module, and I'm going to call this OpenAI. And the reason we're doing this in the backend is because we have sensitive information here that we don't want to expose to the front end of the website. You can learn more about this in my general API tutorial. I go a lot more in depth and explain things there. So I might breeze through some things here that you can look up there if you want something more detailed. So first I'm going to create a function, and I'm exporting this so that I can kind of run it here in the back end, and we're going to need to import it to the front end. And I'm just going to call this get answer from AI. And this is going to be an asynchronous function because we're making a call to an API. We're using fetch. And in order to do that, we are going to need to import fetch here on the top level. So I'm going to import fetch from Wix fetch. And I'm also going to import get secret from the Wix secrets backend. Okay, and these are two things that we're going to need to use inside of our get answer from AI function. So we're going to need a few things here. So we're going to need our URL or our endpoint. We're going to need the API key. And we're going to need a body. And we're going to have our options. And now let's head over to the API itself and see how we get each of those things. So I'm going to head over to the API reference. And right over here, we have our endpoint. So I'm going to go over there and grab the endpoint and paste it right here back in the editor under URL. This is the endpoint that we're going to be calling. And for the API key, I can just use here await get secret. And I'm going to copy over the name of my API key here from the secrets manager. And I always prefer copy pasting because it's very easy to make a typo. And I feel like when I copy paste values, I make less typos. So that's just my method. You can also type it out. Body we'll get to in a moment. As for options, so we already know that the method is going to be post. And you can see that right over here in the API reference, it's going to be a post. So let's go a little in depth and see kind of what our parameters look like, what our body looks like that we're sending to the API endpoint. So we have the model, and basically OpenAI has different models, which are kind of different AI brains. And if you follow the link here of the model overview, then you can kind of see the different models. And we're going to be using models from the GPT-3. And even within GPT-3, they have different submodels, and these have different capabilities that you can see here. For example, the Text DaVinci is the most capable one, but it could be that it's a bit slower, very capable, faster, and lower cost than DaVinci. Okay, so there's like a cost model because, as we said, This API is not free forever. We're currently using a free trial, but it won't be free forever. And you kind of need to weigh the cost benefits as well as speed that you want from your app, so that you can read more about here. Except for model, which is the only required thing to pass to the API, we have a prompt, which it says here optional, but I don't see a situation where you're passing these parameters without a prompt, because otherwise the API is kind of useless. Um, and another one that we're going to be using is max tokens. So tokens are not exactly characters. You can follow this link to read more about tokens here and see, how many tokens you want your answer to be. Here they say roughly rule of thumb, 1 token is 4 characters of text. So just kind of, you can do times 4, or 100 tokens is 75 words, however you want to calculate it. And the last thing that you can pass in, not the last thing you can pass in, but the last thing we'll be doing in this tutorial is temperature. So that is, according to the definition here, how risk-taking this model is. So, if it's a higher temperature, then it will be more creative. This would be good if you're saying like, okay, write me a poem. Whereas if it's lower, that might be better for if you need like some technical instructions or something like that. And you can go on here and read, and these are all options that you can pass in, which can really change, how the AI behaves. But I'm not going to go into each one in depth because that would just take a very long time. So I'm going to go ahead and copy over just these 4 first parameters from the body. And I'm going to head back to our editor, and I'm going to put this right over here and make sure I have that closing squiggly bracket in there. So we're using the text DaVinci. The prompt for now is just say this is a test. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take out this prompt here and switch it out for a variable, which we're going to pass into our getAnswerFromAI function. And that way I can determine what the prompt will be, and it'll be different each time. For max tokens, I'm going to want a little more than 7. I'm going to go with something like 20. And for temperature, I'm just going to put it at 0.5, something in the middle to start with, and we can adjust that kind of as we're developing our bot. And the next thing I'm going to want to add here are going to be our headers. So we have 2 headers that we should be passing here. One is the authentication one, and one is just the content type. So if we head over here to the reference, we can see here content type, application JSON, and authorization bearer your API. So I'm going to copy those 2 over, and I'm going to put those right here under headers. And I need to just make some adjustments here because I copied it over from the curl version. But we're using fetch over here, so it's slightly different. And I'm going to put this into excellent. And for the bearer, I'm going to use template literal because we're going to be putting our API key right in here. And this needs a comma. And here I'm going to switch out your API key. Scroll down, zoom in a little bit. Here I'm going to be using, instead of your API key, I'm going to be using API key, and make sure that you have a space here. Okay, there needs to be a space between bearer and API key, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so we have our URL, API key body. Let's put our body in with our options as well. So our body is going to be JSON.stringify body. And again, I'm not going into depth here in terms of how exactly all the elements of fetch work. If you want to learn more about that, I recommend checking out my other API tutorial. But now we just kind of need to pass all of this into our fetch method. So I'm going to go over here, fetch, and pass in our URL, and pass in our options. And then I can say const data will be equal to response.json. Don't forget await here as well, because .json is also a promise. and then I can return the data. Okay, so if everything is working here, then when I run this function with a prompt, I should get back an answer from the AI. I'm just going to zoom in. Should I zoom in one more? Is that too big? Okay, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Just kind of zooming in so you can get a nice good look at the code, even though it makes the editor a little hard to work with. I'm going to go ahead and click run. And let's see what it returns. So this is what got returned from our call, and we got an error. You must provide a model parameter. So let's take a look back at our function. And we are definitely passing in the model. So I'm going to go and do a quick look at what we have, and boom. Okay, so we have a typo. And 90% of the bugs, I would say, are usually typos. So if everything seems like it should be working and it's not working, look for the typo. And sometimes it can take a while to find. And that's why I said, like before, I like to copy paste things more than writing them out myself. Because if I had went to, let's say, MDN and copied over these options, I wouldn't have had this typo in method. But I was like, oh, I know this, so I'm going to do it myself. And turns out I have an error, which is not the end of the world. It just kind of slows things down a bit. So now that I fixed up this method from my typo, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this console because I don't need it. And let's run our function one more time. I'm going to erase this previous answer and run. Okay, so now our text completion came back, and we have here choices, 0, and here we have usage. And I'm looking for the actual answer. So I think it's this, package.com.example Android. Because I passed it with null. Okay, so this is what's going to happen if you pass with no prompt. So that's something you don't want. And if I pass, for example, a prompt that says, are you working? Then, and we run this, then I will get something a little more intelligible. So choices, no, I'm not working right now, which is ironic because it is working. So as you see, the OpenAI has a bit of a sense of humor. Let's see what would happen if I change the temperature, let's say to 0. Would it be less comical? I'm curious. So I'm going to have here, are you working? I'm going to run it. And it came back. And the choices now are, okay, same answer. Okay, so the temperature didn't matter here that much. But maybe for a different prompt, it would have made a little bit more of a difference. It's kind of just the kind of thing you have to play around with or read the documentation in depth to understand a little better. And this, you can see here, the length of about, I guess this is the length of about 20 tokens, which we told it. So it could be we're going to want to up our tokenage a little bit, let's say to something like 150, just to make our answers slightly longer. But now we have our basic kind of prompt answer working. So we can actually head to the front end of our website and set up our interface for the user to actually interact with our kind of AI API that we set up here. So I'm going to go and make this smaller. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And here on the home page, I'm going to be setting up a few things. I'm going to be setting up an input element. I'm going to set up a button, and I'm going to set up a text box, which will display the answer. And I'm going to display kind of some indications for the user that the answer is loading or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to set that up right now, and I'll be back and explain what's going on in a moment. Okay, so I went ahead and I set up our front-end elements. And as I said, we have a text box, we have a button, we have the text where the answer will be, and we have this kind of Lottie animation that I put in for loading. And I'm kind of going to assume that you know how to do all those things using the Wix editor. Now we're going to go ahead and we are going to write the code that will make this page function. So before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and name my elements. So for the text box, I'll say prompt input. Button will be, let's say, ask button. This will be loading animation. And this will be our answer text. Okay, and now what we want to do is our answer text will only show once we get our answer. So this is going to start off as hidden or collapsed. You can decide based on your kind of user interface and what works there. And now we're going to write out a function which will get the, it will use the prompt to get the answer and then display that here. So I'm going to say const ask question. Let's call it that. And let me zoom way in so you can see what I'm doing here with the code. I always forget the zooming in part. And excellent. So hopefully you can see this now. And so this function ask question is first going to take the input from the prompt. So we're going to say const prompt is equal to prompt input dot value. And now we're going to need to pass this into our AI function, the get answer from AI. So we're going to need to import that from the backend. Get answer from AI, and I'm importing that from backend / OpenAI. And this I now need to turn into an async function because the function get answer from AI is also asynchronous. And I'm going to say const answer is equal to await get answer from AI and pass in the prompt here. And then as soon as we have an answer, I'm going to say that the value of our answer text should be equal to our answer, and that we should show our answer text. And that's pretty much it. The last thing I need to add in is just our little kind of loading animation. So the loading animation, I'm going to start as soon as somebody starts asking a question. So I'm going to say loading animation dot show, and I'm going to make sure that it's hidden to begin with. Make that hidden. And then as soon as our answer text shows, then I'm going to hide that loading animation. So loading animation dot hide. And this ask a question function is all going to run when we click on our button. So we're going to add an event listener for our ask button, on click, and we're going to pass in this ask question function. And that should pretty much be it. I'm just going to zoom out back so we can see our entire layout here. And I'm going to just change this to, just to make it a little more realistic, ask a question. Oh man. Okay, yeah, I hate, sometimes this happens in Wix. Let me do it here. Ask a question. Copy that over. Oh my gosh. Going crazy. Okay, let's start by changing the text of the start now button. So I'm going to say this ask. Ask. Just say ask. And here, instead of ask a question, I'll actually change it to write a question. No, I'll just leave it at ask a question. I don't want to go too crazy. Okay, so let's head into preview mode. And now I'm going to ask my question. I'm going to ask the same question. Is this working? And we should get a longer answer this time because I upped the tokens. And okay, so it did show our paragraph text here, but it didn't populate it with the answer. So let's head back. Okay, so here's my mistake. If you remember when we did the get answers from AI, then here in the answer, so we got this is actually the answer. So it includes a lot of things except for our actual answer. So what I want to do is I'm going to make some changes to the get answer from AI function. I'm going to change it so that it only really sends this text back to the front end, because that's really the only thing that I want in the front end from this whole function. So let me zoom back in. And I'm going to go over here and say that I want to return data.choices0.text. And now if I run this, it should just return, no, I'm not working right now. Okay, and this is what we actually want in our front end. So if I go and I close this, zoom out again, and run this again in preview mode, I'm going to go ahead and say, are you working? Give me a long answer. Okay, I want something a little longer than just its like one sentence answer. And let's see what it comes back with. Okay, so here's our long answer. And we have some layout here issues. Some layout issues here in Editor X. I mean, this is pretty easy to fix. I'm just going to add like a stack for all of this. Or we could just place it in a container and change this, let's say, to a 1x3 container, and make sure that this is in the bottom. Head over here, just on the bottom, make sure the button is in the middle, and this can also be in the middle, and this can be on the top. Excellent. This should deal with our layout issue. Write me a poem. And let's see what comes out here. There you go. Okay, so our poem is here on the bottom. So if your goal was to just create something like this, a simple question answer AI, then you're done with this tutorial. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to try and take it a step further and create something that is a little more like a chatbot. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a repeater where I'm going to present the kind of back and forth between the chatbot and the person. And I'm going to also style the prompts in a slightly different way so that it mimics more of a conversation. So I am going to pause the video, add some UI elements, and continue explaining how we're going to set that up. Okay, so I finished setting up the basic UI for our chatbot, and we still have our prompt input, send button, and animation. The only thing I changed up is instead of having a text answer, we have a repeater with text boxes inside of them, and this is really where our chat is going to display. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the back end and kind of plan out how this chatbot is going to work. So let's zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to go to our backend OpenAI file. And what we need to do, first let's do some planning. So let's think about what we need to pass to our AI in order to get an answer. The first thing we're going to need to pass in is an introduction, like something that kind of explains to the AI bot who they are, what they should be doing, how they should be acting. And this will kind of give a little context and form how the answers come out. The second thing that we're going to need to do is pass in the whole previous conversation. And that is because I want the bot to kind of remember what has happened in the past in case the person references it in their next question. So we're going to need to pass in all the prompts and the AI answers. So the way I'm going to style it is I'm going to style it as just a string for the introduction. I'm going to have a string. And for the prompts and AI answers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an array of objects. And the reason I'm using an array is because it has a specific order. So the conversation has a specific order. And of objects is because I kind of want to record two pieces of data for each of these array entries. One is the the name of the person or AI or whoever created that entry and the entry itself. So it will look something kind of like this. We're going to have an array, and inside of that array will be an object. And then here I'll have, let's say, name. And here we'll have the user's name. And then we'll have text. And this will be the text. And then there'll be, after this object, there will be another object, which is exactly the same. Okay, and here we have our AI bot. And we have its text. Okay, and it'll just be a back and forth like this. And theoretically, one of them can give 2 questions or answers in a row, but that would be a little more complicated to plan out. Okay, so now that we've kind of planned out how our prompts are going to work, we should create a function that will create one single prompt out of this logic, okay? Because our user is just going to give a question, and all of this information will be stored on the front end and passed into a function, which will turn it into one single prompt string. So let's create that function, and I'm going to call that const generate prompt. And this is also going to be an async function. And I'm going to export it as well because this is actually the function that we're going to be using on the front end. And so what are we going to do here? So this generate prompt will take a question. And I'm not writing prompt here because this is what gets passed here is not the prompt that gets asked directly to the AI bot. Okay, so actually I am taking that back. This won't be a question. This will be a chat array. Chat array. See, I'm already changing my mind because we're going to store this on the front end for now. Okay, we're going to store this chat on the front end. If you want it to persist, you can also store it to a data set or to session or something like that, but I'm just going to go simple and store it on the front end. So we're actually going to pass this full array each time that we generate a new prompt. And our const here will be the introduction. So introduction. And what I'm going to do with this chatbot is I'm going to style it to act like Wix support. Okay, so I want to give it an introduction which tells it, you are a Wix support representative. You are helpful, polite, and professional. You need to ask for the website, email, and issue the person is encountering. Eventually, you will say you can't help and need to pass the question on to the offline team. Okay, so that's a typical Wix support conversation. And that's going to be the intro. I might need to tweak this eventually because I don't know how the AI bot is going to act with this information, but that's in general my instructions to the AI bot before I tell it what the actual conversation is. I'm going to say also, Wix support representative. At the end, I'm just going to say, no, in the beginning, I'll say, make up a name for yourself. Again, I don't know if that will work, but that's what I want it to do. And here we are going to have our chat array. Okay, and now we need to basically change this chat array into just text. So I'm going to say const conversation. and this will just be equal to an empty string. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through our array. So I'm going to say chat array dot for each. And I'm going to say here entry. And then for each entry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say, what should I call it? Message equals, or no, chat line. Naming things is the hardest part of coding. That's what they always say. So chat line equals to entry dot name. Let's do this as a template literal. So entry dot name dot space, and then here we're going to have entry dot text, and then let's see if I should put in a new line here. I'll just make sure there's a period. Let's see how this works. Again, there might need to be tweaking here. This is kind of the first time I'm doing it. I didn't practice this, so here goes nothing. Basically what I did is I said, let's say, for example, it will have the name of the chatbot and the text. So how will it know what the name is? Okay, we might need to work that later on. Yeah, we might need to figure that out later on. But for now, it'll do that. And then what we'll do is we will call the get answer from AI. So I'm going to say const answer equals await answer from AI. And here we're going to pass in our, oh, I forgot here, sorry, conversation plus equals chat line. Okay, basically we're adding all the chat lines to the conversation. This should be a let, so that we can change it. And then or maybe I should just do this introduction. Okay, maybe we don't even need this. Let's just say let introduction. And I'm going to block this out. And then here we'll have introduction. I don't know if like not having spaces between the lines will matter or not, to be honest, with the chatbot, but we'll see. And then we get get answer from AI, introduction. And we can return answer. Okay, so this will be a single answer. And then what we can do is the following. So we're going to pass this, we're going to call this from the front end. So I'm going to go back to our front end right here in home. And here we're going to have generate prompt. And here we're going to have our chat array. And let's say, okay, so then when somebody asks a question, what are we going to do? We're going to say that the prompt, so this is going to be now, I'm going to change the names up a little bit. So this is going to be text input. And then I'm going to say text equals to text input.value. Just because it's to differentiate that this is not exactly our prompt anymore. This is just part of the prompt. And then for now, I'm just going to call this person user. I'm not going to, later on, we can let them put in their name and then use their name in the conversation. But I'm just going to say chat array dot push. And what we're going to be pushing in here is an object, which will be name will be user, and the text will be the text. Okay, so this is what we're going to be pushing into the array. And then the answer will be generate prompt from the chat array. Okay, so for the first question, essentially, there will be kind of this will be the only entry, and then as soon as we get an answer back from the AI, then we need to handle it a little differently. So our answer, we're also going to be pushing to the chat array. So it's the chat array dot push, and here we're going to also have an object, and this will be name Wix rep, and our text will be the answer. And after we get back this answer, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually populate our repeater. So I'm going to go ahead and set up our repeater population. So I'm going to say, did we name our repeater? No, let's call this chat log repeater. And here we're going to have text. And here we can write chat log repeater dot on items ready. And here we're going to have a callback function. And I'm kind of assuming you know the basics of populating a repeater using Velo and item data. So one thing I'm already picking up on here is that we're going to need an ID for each of these entries for it to work in our repeater. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to add here an ID. And this is going to be just a random ID. So I'm going to use math.for and math.random times a bunch, and then .toString, because this needs to be a string. And this should be good enough for now. I mean, in the future, maybe I would use like a UUID generator or something like that for this, but for now, this is totally sufficient. And here, so when we're populating the repeater, we're going to say the text should be equal to, text. So this is going to be item text.text. And here I'm going to use template literal, and we're going to say that it should be very similar to how we set it up for our bot. So it'll be item data dot name, and then we're going to have our item data dot text. And now we just need to, after we push the answer to the array, we just need to populate the repeater. So we're going to say, not populate it, but pass in the data. So chat log repeater dot data equals chat array. This is not right. And format. One last thing I'm going to do from a kind of user experience UI perspective is hide our repeater, and I'm only going to show it right over here. So I'm going to hide it. And this will just mean that we won't see that ugly starter repeater when there's nothing in there yet. Show. Okay, here goes nothing. Let's preview this, and I'm imagining that we're going to need to do some tweaking. Let me zoom out a bit because I didn't really do a lot of the formatting in terms of editor X and whatnot. So it's kind of a little bunched together here. But like, I'm just going to say hi. See what happens. Okay, so user hi. Wix rep, hello there, my name is name. Okay, so this didn't really work. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do it. So it generates kind of like a random name and then puts it in there. But I'm here to help you with your issues. Maybe having a problem with your website. Can you please provide your website URL, your email address, and a brief description of the issue you're encountering? So yeah, in the chat itself, they might say this like one after the other. They might not say everything at once. And that can also all be styled kind of in the introduction. So let's say I'll say, my website is www.example.com. And let's see what happens now. Okay, so we have our next input and we have our answer. So already some things that I'm realizing here that can be improved. So obviously the fact that we don't want this repeater to jump up and cover the input box when it's kind of full. But also we might want to display the user's question before the Wix rep answers. That's how a chat box would usually work, a chat bot, sorry. And let's see what we got here for the answer. My email is example.com. I'm having trouble to lay out on my website. So the Wix rep kind of made up its own email and um, its own problem. Okay, because I this is actually quite amusing. So basically, it asked for three things. I gave it one, so it decided that it would make up its own answer to my questions. And then like a few more details of the issue having. So let's go ahead and I'm going to try and address some of the issues that we had here, which is one, the name. Two, the user should see kind of their question before the answer comes and try and prevent this kind of situation from happening. So I'm going to go here to edit site. First, let's deal with the layout. So I'm going to actually group all this stuff together. Okay, I'm experiencing a slight slowdown here. Excellent. Place in container. And then I'm going to place both of these also in its own container. Kind of like we did for the regular question. And let's put these two together. So let's just stack them. That should be good enough. Okay, it's not beautiful, but it should prevent the problem that we were having before. The next thing that I want to do is right over here, which is rather simple. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Is that also after we push our question to the chat array, I'm going to populate the chat log repeater. Okay, and this should be enough to display our question before the answer comes. And this function is starting to get a little convoluted, so maybe in the future I would refactor this and split it up into several different functions, but for now, I'm going to keep it as is. Now let's head to our backend and try and fix some of the quirky behavior that we were getting from the AI. So I'm going to go ahead to our backend. And first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to separate out the creation of the name into like a separate action. So I'm going to say, let name equal to generate answer from AI. And the prompt will be create a random person's name. And that will be the name. And then here, I'm just going to directly tell it what its name is. I'm going to change this into a template literal for the introduction. And I'm going to put here, instead of make up a name for yourself. I'm going to say named, and whatever comes back from name. Okay, so we're kind of using the AI multiple times to generate different parts of this bot. And okay, so you're helpful, polite, and professional. You need to ask for website, email, issue, countering in 3 separate questions. If you don't receive necessary information, ask again. Okay, because that's kind of the behavior that we want. We don't want it to make up answers. Yeah, okay, this looks pretty good. Let's see kind of how it behaves now. So I'm going to zoom back out and go back into preview mode. And let's try it out. So I'm going to say hi. Hi. Okay, so we have here John Smith. Okay, so interesting. So I had told it to call itself Wix rep. I forgot to tell it to pass that kind of name value to the front end so that we can kind of do that back and forth with the names. But actually, because I had already told it it's a chatbot, so when it generates its own prompts, its own answers, then it kind of, prefixed it with the name that it made up for itself. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to think about how to fix that. But anyways, this is a much better start. So I'm John with Wix support. Can you please tell me the website you're having issue with? So this is more realistic. So it's not going to ask for 3 things at the same time. It just asks for the website. And then I'm going to say, yeah, my website is www.example.com. Send that. And then, okay, great, thank you. Can you please tell me the email address associated with the website? So I'm going to say bob@example.com. Perfect. Can you please tell me what the issue with your account is? So this is actually like really good. I'm really happy with this result because it's really feeling exactly like a conversation with Wix support. So let me say, I have an element that I want to make wider. How do I do that? And let's see what they say. Sure, I can help you with that. Can you please tell me which element you are trying to make wider? So this is exactly, this is really great. This is like exactly how, I mean, maybe Wix has bots on the end. I don't know. I mean, just judging by this conversation that I'm having here with my bot, this is exactly what the Wix rep would say. I'm going to say it is the box, the green box element on my home page. And as you can see here, like it's not so comfortable in terms of like how the repeater is styled. Great, let me look and see what I could do to help. That is exactly what the Wix rep would say, like 1,000% what the Wix rep would say. Let's see. So that's the only answer it's going to give. I could think of how to make it give 2 answers in a row. You kind of really have to get into, like, you have to give a lot of help to the AI bot if you want it to do more complex things, because it really only knows how to make, like, you're making an API call, you're passing in a prompt, it gives back an answer. So if you want something more complex, like having the AI bot say, like, okay, I'm going to take a look and then reply kind of a few seconds later with a new prompt, then you're going to have to think about how you're going to do something like that. Okay, so I've done a lot of tweaking and playing around with the UI. I kind of designed it so it looks a little bit like Wix support. Obviously, it's not one for one, but it's pretty close second. And I've just been tweaking kind of the algorithm, and I'll point those stuff out to you in a moment, but I just want to show you a conversation that I just had with the bot, which I feel is pretty good. Obviously, there's a lot of room to improve. I would like if, for example, over here, it wasn't saying all these things at once. I would like for it to try and propose some solutions before saying it can't provide a solution. But overall, based on the instructions that I gave it, this is pretty good. So let's go and take a look under the hood. So first for the backend, I've been playing around with the prompt a lot and making it longer, shorter, giving more instructions. And what I found is like simpler is better. If you try and overcomplicate the kind of this introduction, then it gets confused and it started doing really weird things. I'm sure I can probably engineer this a little better, but for now, it's giving a conversation like you just saw. I also noticed that adding in the kind of the double indentation before the chat line that is provided helps the chatbot understand a little bit. And that's true also in the responses that it provides. So in the front end, I kind of needed to account for that and slice off those like that double what's it called, new line, uh, and just account for that so that like the UI doesn't get screwed up. In terms of how I set this up, so basically it's just a repeater, and there's a wrapper and text for the bot and a wrapper and text for the user, and then I just kind of condition inside of here, depending on if a name comes back. Because as you saw previously in the demonstration, once I tell the bot that it has a name, it kind of knows to use that name in the chat. So we don't really need to pass the bot a name. And you can see here that when I'm passing things to the bot, I'm only passing kind of the text itself, and I don't need to pass the name. And I only pass a name when I'm talking about the user, and I get that name from the first answer that they give. So I said, if the chat array.length is 1, then the name should just be equal to the text that they answer. So I'm just assuming that they're going to give their name in plain text. They're not going to say something like, my name is so-and-so. I'm trying to think what else I should point out here in terms of what I've done. I added a just that you can press enter key and it'll ask the question using on key press for the text input. And the rest was just kind of editor X designing, making this sticky, and etc. And yeah, I think I'm going to wrap this up at this point. I'm pretty happy with this result. I will leave a link to this template in the comments below. I will probably be offering this as well for sale for a few bucks if somebody wants to just copy over the template and stick in your own, OpenAI API key and design your own chat, then you can do that. Yeah, all the details will probably be on my website soon after publishing this video. If not, then you can feel free to reach out via my website. That's all for today. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to put out new content every week, so stay tuned.